So, welcome, Dr. Ericka Caldwell-Clinch, to the Light Dimension Network podcast. Today, we're meeting on Thursday, July the 25th, 2024. And we're not live, we're just recording today. But today is a monumental day for me and for you, I believe. It's monumental for me because this is the first visual podcast that I have recorded since I started recording podcasts for the Light Dimension Network. And I never expected that I would even start in the area of marriage. Even though it's an area that I know one day I will cover, I didn't think that I would branch there so quickly. And I just want to tell you at the outset that I am honored that you are sharing your story publicly on this platform. And I just I want our viewers to know that Dr. Ericka, Dr. E as she refers to herself on her social media platforms, she is an educator, she is a faith leader in her church, she's an author, she's a wife coach, and she is an influencer of women who are single, waiting to be married, mothers. She is just a gem. She's a jewel among gems. And I just want to give you a chance to show us direct us to some points of light about what brings us here. The main focus for this particular podcast is fidelity over feelings. And so in marriage, a lot of people, whether they have a faith-based background or not, come into marriage out of a fairy tale kind of design in their mind. Really kind of not, I think a lot of people aren't really sure about the purpose of marriage, other than, they love this person, they're attracted to them, they want to have their baby, right? So can you just start off by telling us, how did you arrive at getting married?
Well, first of all, thank you so very much for even allowing me to be here tonight. I consider it an honor and definitely a privilege to be able to come on this platform and share my story, share the story that God so beautifully orchestrated and so beautifully painted in my life and allowed me to partner with him. So the question is, what I guess, why did I get married, or what, moved me to get married? As little girls, we often think about marriage all the time. We often think about getting married, a storybook wedding. I can remember playing around at home and putting on my mom's wedding dress, walking all through the house in my mom's wedding dress. And so even looking at that now, back then, God was already preparing me for where he would have me today. And so marriage is something that I always wanted and I always, loved, but I had no idea that God was going to actually use my marriage as a sacrifice. My God.
Mm.
For many others. And God was going to use my marriage to actually let me know who I am in him. And so I had no idea that that's what was going to be the vehicle God used to usher me into purpose. It was my
Wow.
marriage. It was my marriage.
So even on that, you're actually alluding to a concept. It's more than a concept, but the principle, I would say, of covenant, what God instituted as covenant. We
Right.
don't use that word in modern life, but it's
Mhm.
different than just, a casual agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about God using your marriage as a vehicle for, defining your life through him, talk about what did you know about, or did you know anything about what the marriage covenant meant at the time you were getting married?
That is such a good question because I did not. I had no idea. I honestly focused a lot on the wedding, to be perfectly honest with you. My mother was a wedding coordinator on the side. So that was her part
Wow.
time, that was her passion and everything of that sort. So I grew up around weddings. My mother was also in education, and my mother was also a licensed funeral director. So I grew up around funeral homes. I grew up around weddings and in the education field as well. But I had no idea what the true foundation of marriage meant. I just did not know. My parents were divorced when I was young. Um, I did not even before then, before they divorced, I did not see a model of what marriage was supposed to look like. My mother worked a lot. Um, my dad worked also, but my dad, did his thing. He did what he wanted to do. He loved me. He loved my mom.
Yeah.
Yes, he did his thing. He did what he wanted to do. I did not grow up in a home
Mhm.
where it was saturated with prayer. We went to church and everything of that sort. Not to say that we didn't believe, but I didn't grow up
Right.
in that. So I did not see marriage that way. Then my mother remarried after she got divorced from my dad. And I married my stepfather. And I did not necessarily get along with him so much until after I came back from college. So I still did not really see and really fully understand because my stepfather was hardcore. He was
Mm,
rough around the edges, but he was a provider.
right.
So I knew what that looked like. He was a provider. He was just hard around the edges.
Right.
I did not know again what it looked like. I was not necessarily taught
Mhm.
how to be a wife and how to be a mother. My mother did the best that she could. And so that's nothing against my mom
Right.
because she did the best that she could. But
Absolutely.
this kind of thing, like
Mhm.
if we think about how God really wants our us to raise our children in a two-parent household,
Yes.
where the father teaches the son how to be a man, how to be a husband, how to be a father, and he shows daughter what she should see in a husband and vice
Right.
versa. If we do that and we follow the biblical order,
Mhm.
things would be a lot different. But to answer your question, I did not know what covenant meant. I focused more on the wedding. I focused more on how big my wedding was and how many
Mm.
people were there, how many bridesmaids I had, where my wedding was going to be. I focused on all of that, but I did not focus on the marriage.
So tell me about the man. What
So,
part, yeah, like what part, um, and I'm following everything you're saying because a lot of what marriage is displayed as is like the fancy free kind of like everything explodes around the wedding day and very little gets highlighted about the day in and day out and what it really is. And so tell me about the man that you that you desired, that you tell me about who you believe he was at the time.
so I remember I just really wanted to be with someone that loved me. You know, I was never a I was never a small girl, right? And I did at times growing up, I battled with low self-esteem because I was never a small girl. I was always the biggest in my class. Um, I was always, people would make fun of me and everything like that. So I was not outspoken. I did not, really speak up for myself. And so I just knew that I wanted to be with someone that loved me for me. And at the time when I met my husband, I was actually, get this, I was trying to like someone who I thought was the one for me because he had the career, he had the nice home, he had the nice car. I was trying to like him, but I really didn't like him a whole lot. But I was trying to because I thought that that's what I needed to have.
Right.
Meanwhile,
Check
my
the
husband,
boxes.
yeah. So meanwhile, my husband here is a hard worker, blue collar man. Um, he is doing all of the things that I actually desired. He would tell me every day because we ended up working together. And it's funny how we ended up at the same place because I tried my hardest not to go to that school. And I ended up at that school. He was at that school, which was 30 minutes away from where he lived. So there was no reason why he was supposed to be at that school. And so
Wow.
he worked there. And then I came there, and every day he would, tell me how beautiful I was. He would ask me if I wanted to have some lunch. And I was just so mean to him. I
Wow.
can't even tell you why I was mean to him because he did not check the boxes, right?
Okay.
He didn't fit
Yeah.
the criteria that should have been in those boxes. But
Right.
meanwhile, he saw me and he saw something in me, and at that time, I still did not have a solid relationship with God. I did not know that. I was just merely
Yeah.
going to. So I
Right.
still didn't know any of that. I could not tell you like one scripture
Right.
because I didn't
Yeah.
know, you
Right.
know. So I just really wanted to be with someone that loved me for me and all of my weight.
Okay. That's a big one.
You know what I
No
mean?
pun intended, but that's a big one because because nothing you've said so far, like in that story, shows that your mind was even like in the realm of like covenant relationship. What are we? We're gonna have kids? Are we gonna have this? It was you're trying to love yourself, find
Mhm,
love, maybe through the lens of this man, of your
mhm,
husband now, but at the time, like really trying to find who you were
mhm, mhm,
and having someone else define that for you,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Now, was your husband at the time, did he have faith? Like was he a believer in Jesus, or did he have any other faith?
No, no, no. He believed in God. He definitely believed in God. Was he like going to church all the time and everything? No, he was not. But he
Right.
did believe in God. Um, so when you really look at it, we were equally yoked because I wasn't thinking about sin. I wasn't thinking about, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. I wasn't thinking about any of that because I did not understand. I was not convicted of anything. I was
Yes.
so I was carnal, very much carnal. So that's really where I was. But he did believe in God. He did, um, you know, have a relationship. But was he going to church all the time like that? No, he was not.
Now, did you have any like premarital counseling or anything like that before?
We did. We had about 3 weeks of premarital counseling, and this is the thing. This is the when hindsight is 2020. Going back and looking at it. My husband and I, before we got married, we lived together for 1 year.
Okay.
Um, I remember us going to the marriage counseling, and the reason why we went to marriage counseling not because we really wanted to go, it's because we would have got a discount on our marriage license.
Right.
So that's why we went to marriage counseling, right? So we could just take the certificate to go and get, a discount on our marriage license. But I think, as I said, hindsight is 2020. Going back looking, there was no correction
Yes.
that particular in that particular marriage counseling, because at that time it was the pastor from the church I was attending, and we told him the very first session that we lived together, but there was no correction given. But at that time, I remember saying, "Oh, he is awesome. He's not judging us. We live together, but he's a pastor. He's not judging us." And so then
Right.
when I really dedicated my life to the Lord, and I look back and I'm like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
something should have been said. Like, can y'all at least until y'all get married?" Because even when we started, when we lived together, we were planning our wedding. But something in hindsight, something should have been said. But y'all think that y'all can move out for the year until you get
Right.
married, or you go there and she goes somewhere? But there was no correction given looking back on it. But
Yeah.
I was good with it at that time because I was, he's not judging us. We all right.
Right.
Like him.
Now, tell me, like, was he married before? Were you
Yes. My
okay?
husband, my husband is 11 years older than me, so he was married before. And
Okay.
he was married, it was just honestly was something to do. So it didn't last. It was
Okay.
something to do.
Hmm.
It did not last, and no negative um nothing negative towards the prior marriage, but it was something to do, so it did not last.
Yeah. Now, I want to just tell our listening, viewing audience about how I came across your story
Okay.
and
Mhm.
why I really believe it needs to be highlighted.
Mhm.
Um, we belong to like a Facebook group that is for marriages. And I
Mhm.
was literally scrolling late at night before I hit my bed, and I saw your story. I saw your picture with your husband, and you were saying, the highlight was, married 21 years, separated 8 years, and God restored our marriage, and it's possible, and in a nutshell. And I thought, what? Like, how is that possible?
Mhm.
And that's just what's so remarkable about God in your story.
Mhm.
So you didn't start out really knowing who you were,
Mhm.
and even in light of God, but outside of God, it was kind of like you're still discovering who you were. You didn't have parents who necessarily modeled what marriage is or what it took or what defines it, anything like that.
Mhm.
So you kind of came with a little information to the altar and then started a life,
Mhm.
right? With just maybe on a little bit of faith that, hey, like after the wedding, if we do up the wedding really good, we're good.
Mhm.
So, in a time where many marriages are not finding themselves to be like they're not finding any hope
Mhm.
to resurrect feelings. They're not finding any hope or any reason to put in the effort. Maybe they've gone extended periods of time where, one person wanted to invest time and counseling and prayer or like whatever. Maybe the other person didn't, had no thought about it. Like, tell me when when you started getting married, or what after you got married, what was like a defining period of time for you that caused the like a separation?
Um,
Like, was there a happy period for like the first, 5 years, 10 years, or?
I started to see, one of the things that I say all the time is the enemy is not upset when you are dating or even if you are engaged, because there's no covenant established there. The minute that you say I do,
Mm,
that is when he wreaks havoc, because a covenant is then established. And so
yes.
immediately when we said I do, I started to see different things happen. It
Mhm.
was okay while we were living together because we were in sin.
Right.
We were in sin. And so we already pretty much belonged to the enemy. So we had issues there and there, but nothing like, when we said I do, because the covenant was established. But we did have some great years, but one of the things I do want to say is, and what's so very important, I go back to the two-parent household and what the
Mhm.
father is supposed to teach the mother and what the mother is supposed to teach the daughter and vice versa, is when you do not have that model,
Mm,
that is shown for you,
right.
um, you don't know how to navigate through being a husband or being a wife.
Yes.
Do it the best way you possibly can.
Mm,
You do it the way that you see on TV.
right.
And so you do it the way that you see on TV, or you do it the way that you see other people doing it, but you don't know what goes on behind closed doors.
Right
And
there.
so
Yeah.
what happened for us is that, yes, we had some very good years. We had some very good years. And what happened, um, we were going to be moving to another state, and my husband got the job first. And
Right.
so he went ahead and went, and myself and the children were going to come after. And he got there and he was like, I don't like it so much. I want to come back home. But no doors would open for him to get a job back here.
Wow.
And he did not want to come home without a job. And so it took a long time. When I say a long time for him to get a job. It took at least 3 years
Wow.
for him to get a job. So he was away, and that time period away
Yes.
from each other.
Yeah. What was that like?
Oh, because I'm here and
Right.
he's there, and I have the kids and he's there. So what happened was he established a relationship where he was.
Mm,
And so when he established that relationship where he was, I sensed something was going on, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So
right.
finally, you know, um, God opened up the door where he was able to come back home, and he broke that off and
Mm,
came back home. And things were very good, when he got back home.
right.
But if you are not in a place where you're intentional and that door opens just a little bit,
Yeah.
he comes in and he wreaks havoc again. He's coming back the same way. So he was continuing conversation with that person in the other state. And I sensed it, but I didn't know it was a person somewhere else. I thought the person
Right.
lived in the same state. And so I, I packed the things and I said, it's not going to work.
Now,
If I
how?
can
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
go back and fix that, I would, because at that time, now mind you, at this time I'm growing closer to God, but at that time
Mm,
I put him into the enemy's hands because I
like
put him
sending
out
him away.
from
Sorry.
me, wife.
Right.
And so when I did that, um, it opened up the door and opened up the avenue for that relationship to restart, because
Mhm.
that person moves from that state to this state and
Now,
they have a relationship here.
so you mentioned a word that I feel like is so old, but we know it as sin, right, in the church world. But if people are listening and they're like, what's sin really? Because
Mhm.
we even in church, people, we
Mhm.
bounce over that. Like, we hear the name called, but we don't really understand what that is. And actually, and I even had trouble with it. And I
Mhm.
and one day in my prayer time, I asked the Lord, can you please define sin for
Mm.
me? And simply he said, it's your self-indulgent nature. I
Mm.
said, oh, well, that makes it more clear for me to get it. You were saying that, when you were married, like there wasn't really like an overarching, like, we are committed to this marriage in the
Mhm.
sight of God.
Mhm.
And, if anything goes wrong, we have a master plan, right? It was kind of, he was, likely you were married in a church, with a pastor, but there wasn't a mindset of God, if something goes wrong, then I'm going to turn to God to help me. You were kind of going with the flow of how, like you said on TV, like, your husband cheats, or he's starting to get on your nerves, or he's starting to, like, you're pulling apart. It's like, get out of here. Bye. Right. But as you were saying too, like that opened the door for the enemy to kind of come in and be like, no, well, you said too, like when you were living in sin, in that self-indulgent nature, you didn't really even know what you were doing. You didn't really have any conviction, as you said. And so it's like, yeah, we're fancy free till we get to the altar and we say I do. And then all of a sudden it's like, then you start to get a window into what you really did. Right. But there's safety in this, right? So tell me about your relationship with God. Was it starting to grow when your husband was, kind of, when he went to this other state and you were left with the kids?
Yeah, slowly it started to grow, because I knew I was at my the church, and I knew that God wanted something from me, but I did not know what it was. And
Mm,
I did not know how to give it to him. But I sensed so
yeah,
strong that he wanted something from me. And I knew that sitting in my old church, um, and again, this is, I want to make sure that I say this so plainly and so clearly. This is not speaking anything negative about my former, from my the churches, nothing of that sort. It's
right,
just sometimes people grow spiritually and they need more than what they're receiving. And it's nothing to say,
right.
not saying anything negative. I just knew when I was sitting in church and I did not feel any conviction
Mhm,
about what I was doing. I
right.
didn't feel any conviction about what I was doing or how I was living. I
Mhm,
was like, I think God wants something more for me, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what to give. And it wasn't, I couldn't tell you that, okay, I hear the voice of God. I couldn't tell you that because I don't know. I just sensed it really
right.
strongly. And
Yes.
so as far as that is concerned, I started growing closer and closer to God because I started visiting another church, that church was which was my former church that I was at for 17 years. That church began to develop my relationship with God.
Right.
I didn't necessarily understand the prophetic gift at that time.
Mhm,
I knew that I loved Jesus, and that particular church taught me and strengthened my relationship with the Lord. And
right.
I was starting to grow closer, and so I was starting to pray more.
Mhm. Talk
I
about
knew God gave me wisdom.
that. Mhm,
God gave me wisdom in this situation
right.
because he would say to me, now I know it now at this time, I know it was him then, but I would
Right.
just, it's like, I shouldn't say that to this person, or I shouldn't tell this person that, not
Yeah.
realizing that was the Lord at that time.
Right.
But he would give me wisdom. Don't
Mhm,
tell that person what's going on. Don't tell her what's going on. Yes,
right.
her what's going on because she's going to pray for you. But
Right.
tell her, and don't do this, and don't do that. Yes, do this. No, you can't go there. No, don't let them go there. And so he began to give me, and then I began to piece things together and say, that's the voice of God. That's
Wow.
the voice of God. I began, and I feel him so strongly right now. That's the voice of God. He's talking to me in this situation. So
Right.
to your question, yes, and God began to send people my way.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, I see your husband doing this, and I see your husband
Oh,
doing that. You know, nothing negative, but just saying, I see him as a man of God.
yes.
I see him as this. I see him as that. And I would be like, I don't see that. I, 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 I don't see that, you know? But they would be telling me God was bringing them my way to tell me that, to
And
keep me strengthened.
yes, and because um the feelings, right? Feelings can't keep a covenant going. But fidelity, what God, that God-sized loyalty, I'll just call it, is really, it's like it doesn't give us flimsy excuses,
Mhm.
right? It like, no matter how justified we feel, and this is something that I want you to highlight for us, is like the feelings that you had about what was happening. I mean, like you said, how God gave you wisdom, like not to talk to certain people, do talk to some who will pray, right? And
Mhm.
some might say, like, why? Why couldn't you just talk to Sally? Why couldn't you just talk to Mary?
Mhm.
So what?
Mhm.
So I want them to know, like,
Mhm.
why why that course of action, as
Yeah.
opposed to just, getting on social media and saying, I hate my husband.
Because um, you know, you're so in that state when you are in a place of where you're really believing God for the reconciliation and the restoration, of your marriage. It is so very important that you get the wise counsel. And so opening up your mouth and not hearing from the God and hearing from getting the wisdom of God, you'll tell someone your business
Mm,
and they don't have good intentions for you. And so they will be praying against what
mm,
you're praying for.
yeah,
Death and life are in the power of our tongue. That does not mean that that's only in the mouths of Christians.
right.
That's in the mouths of those non-believers too.
Yes.
You tell someone who is a non-believer, or if you tell someone who is a witch and you're trusting God
Yeah.
for your reconciliation of your marriage, you're telling
Yeah.
someone that will very well be praying against what you're praying for.
Yeah.
You have to use wisdom. And not only that, but you'll tell someone who will tell you, that's not the will of God for you to stand.
So, and that's another thing. It's other people's feelings that get injected.
Right. And then you'll begin, because you are in such an impressionable place, you'll begin to say, maybe I shouldn't be standing.
Right.
Maybe because they'll tell you things like, because I remember hearing this before. Now, I never, asked for the counsel, but they'll be, you're so pretty. You don't have to take that.
Oh,
You can get any man you want. You can get any man you want. You don't have to take that. Why would you take that from him? But you have to have your face like flint. And you can't be moved by what others say. That's why you have to use the wisdom of God in what you say and who you say it to, especially while you're in that storm.
now tell me, did you wrestle with those feelings of like just, wanting to just like dog
Mhm.
your husband out and just be like, look, you know,
Mhm.
You know, with other people? Like, did you wrestle with that? Just going on what somebody said, like, you're a beautiful woman, you could get any man. Like, did you feel like, well, yeah, that's true. Like,
Mhm.
did
Yeah,
you give fuel to those feelings?
I did, because at that time, during the time of separation, again, the wisdom of God, I began to work on myself. I began to, watch what I eat and exercise, and the weight started coming off. And I started, you know, starting to like what I saw in the mirror. And I started
Right.
to be, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So I started to take care of Ericka, you know,
Hmm.
I started to take care of Ericka. And so there were times when I would even, reach out to want to speak to him, because that's a whole nother thing. Like,
Okay.
the wisdom that God gave me in the
Mhm.
midst of that, um, because you go through a cycle. You go through a cycle. I want to just put this plug right here real quick. You go
Mhm.
through a cycle. You go through, when you're first separated, when you coming home, when you coming back, what you doing,
Right.
and you in your mind think that that is going to cause him to want to come home, but that does not.
Wow.
That pushes him further away.
Hmm.
Always sounding sad. Woe is me. You're
Yeah.
crying when you're on the phone with him. When he calls you, you're crying. When he got, all this other kind of stuff, that pushes him further away. That does not make him want to come closer.
Wow.
So God taught me
Hmm.
how to navigate through that, to be okay when I
Wow.
did, to be solid when
Yeah.
I didn't. So yes, there were times where I was like, this is for the birds. I'm gonna tell you what
Hmm.
I said. I'm degreed.
Yeah.
I got 3 degrees.
Right.
I'm in a career.
Yeah.
I don't have to take this.
Hmm.
And the minute I said this is for the birds, I'm not taking this, God will send someone my way. Many times there were people that I did not know.
Isn't that just so God?
And they would just give me a word of the Lord, and that word will sustain me for the next season of the journey, because
Now,
I kept the words.
because you,
I kept all of my words. Every word
yes,
that I received, I kept it. I either wrote it down or recorded what they said, or
yes.
recorded what I remembered, and I kept it in my email is a folder of words
Hmm.
by year.
Wow. By years.
By year.
Like the tension of that, I'm thinking by year. I mean, some days I'm sure felt like weeks,
Yeah.
like being separated. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost like almost like being in prison
Yeah.
in a way. Like, you don't know when the person's coming, when they're gonna be released. Like, I'm picturing it similar to that, like what it could have felt like, locked up in I mean, you have kids.
Mhm.
So how did you deal with those feelings that you had in front of your kids? Like,
Mhm.
how were you able to sustain through in front of them? Like,
Also, the wisdom of God as well, because God did not allow me to say anything negative about my
mhm,
husband.
mhm,
Did not allow me to say anything negative to my children and our children concerning him. I
right,
would just tell them, because they were young at that time. They were still in elementary school. And I would just tell them that God is working on daddy. Um, and I had the faith to believe that he was coming back. So I would tell my children he will be back. Um, after God finishes working on him. I said, but God is working on him. And I had to continue to tell them that, but I never said anything negative
right.
to them about him. I always kept him on top, meaning
Mhm,
I kept him involved in their schoolwork. I would email him their grades. Anything with parent conferences or anything would go on, I emailed it to him, let him know. It was just God's wisdom. I kept him involved,
Right.
kept him involved as if he was still in the picture.
Right.
And so, I God just gave me so much wisdom. He gave me the strategy to navigate through it. Now he's moved on with his life at this time.
Wow.
He's living with someone else.
Wow.
Living.
And yeah.
Still had me to walk it out of wisdom. And God would say to me, Ericka, I'm working this out. I'm working this out because it was a process where,
Mhm.
I couldn't afford the apartment that we were living in anymore, and I had to move home with my mom. That was very
Wow.
tough, because I went
Yeah.
from, and so my children, they don't know, so they're relying on me. And so
Yeah.
in that time, even as I look back on it, because I just looked back on it, a couple of days ago, and
Mhm.
I bawled, thanking
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
You kept us. You kept us, because even at that time I was very, with my children, I was like a mother hen with them. I
Right.
didn't let any and everybody, talk to them or be around them. And I just had to
Right.
really be sheltered, I felt, because
Yeah.
of we're in such a very sensitive time.
Right.
And one of the very first things, and I just want to, say this, one of the very first things when we first separated, I had put him out like in November.
Hmm.
And my husband loves Christmas and he loves his children.
Yeah.
So that Christmas, God said to me, take the children to your mother-in-law's house so they can spend Christmas there. And I was like, what?
Wow.
So I took them there so that they can spend Christmas there, to be with them.
Hmm.
And I remember being in the bed all Christmas Day,
Yeah.
like, bawling and bawling and bawling and bawling, and just like, not really understanding
Yeah.
what's going on, but thanking God,
Hmm.
um, because I knew what he was going to do, you know, in my life, in my husband's life, in our marriage. I knew what he was going to do. And so
Hmm.
I'm very, very thankful to God for that. But, in this whole process, there's a dying to yourself. And that's not what a lot of people are ready to do, or willing to do. But it's
Well,
a
that is actually that is something that it's interesting because here it is, like you feel like you're dying inside, like dying within the relationship, and then so you're bereaved of that, like you're bereaved of having your husband at home and like the relationship.
Mhm.
And then it's like then you're hearing from God, you're getting closer to God. Because
Yeah.
people who don't understand about dying to yourself, I want them to understand what that means. Like in
Yeah.
the context of when you're in relationship with God, it's like he calls us higher, like he calls us to a standard
Hmm.
that causes you to take your gaze away from you and your feelings and your pain.
Hmm.
And but with the promise that, you know what, you give it to me, meaning
Hmm.
God, and I'm going to, in his wisdom and in his majesty, make something out of it if you trust him.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's like this transfer. It's like you give me all of your pain through your prayer, your tears,
Hmm.
your laments to me, whoever I send you, in your obedience to him. And then you have to go on that still small voice of faith and just be like, okay, you said okay. So that dying to yourself, like how do you do that when you feel like you're dying like you've already died to you. Like you almost feel like, because that can be a confusion too. Like
Yeah.
I'm taking the punishment. Like, what do you mean I have to die to myself now? And do what? Be nice?
Yeah.
Like,
One of the best ways I think to really try to explain it is dying to yourself is I'll put it this way. One of the things that my mentor would always say is when we would say, like, well, I feel and I feel and I feel, and she would say, well, a dead man don't feel. A dead man doesn't feel,
mm-hmm.
And so I would never really fully grasp that and fully understand it. But
Right.
when you think of even Jesus bearing, our sins, he who knew no sin became sin. He didn't even know sin. He had nothing to do with sin, but he became sin because he loved us so much. And I'm going to go to the dying to self. One of the stories that God really highlighted for me in the Bible in this walk was the story between Hosea and Gomer, the minor prophet Hosea, and his wife Gomer, that God had him to marry a prostitute. And every time, he would go and buy her back,
Yes.
go back out, and the Bible says a whoring after, what
Yeah.
he wants to. And so she would go right back out again and get herself caught up and entangled in so many different things. And he would have to go back out and buy her back again. And so when you really look at that and see that that is the picture of God's covenant with us,
Right.
and that is the picture of the love that God has
Mm-hmm.
for us. So can we put ourselves, in a situation where you love God so much that
Yeah.
you're willing to put yourself in a situation and be partnered with someone who,
Yeah.
is flawed and has flaws for the glory of God. And so dying to self means that I no longer care about how I feel or what it looks like for me and what
Right.
people think. I no longer care about that, because you don't come to God on Monday and then die on Tuesday. No. God
Right.
has to reel you in first,
Yes.
right? He has to
Yeah.
reel you in first, get
Yes.
you to understand his love. And it's
Yes.
almost like,
Yeah.
hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. It's almost like he's beckoning you to come, right? He's beckoning you to come, and he's loving on you, and he's hugging on you, and he's intimate with you, and he's loving on you, and he's telling you, now I have to break you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you don't necessarily mind the breaking so much because you understand his love. He's got to love you into him first.
Right. And
And
that,
then
yes, yes, that's
that's
a
when you're
very,
dying to self.
and even that's a process.
Yeah.
Allowing his love, because the love of God is it's unusual.
Yeah.
And for most of us, we haven't really experienced a level of love that is so safe,
Yeah.
that we can trust it to that point of
Mhm.
just like like the love is so secure that
Yeah.
because lots of us, like women, I mean, all of us have had pain is guaranteed in this life. Conflict is guaranteed in this
Yep.
life because we have to deal with each other. We have to deal with people. So this the call to fidelity over feelings is like, if we didn't have that, like
Mhm.
everything would be destroyed.
Mhm.
Like if we didn't even have, like, it's chaos.
Mhm.
You don't keep a certain like, mortgage payments, like your house, business relationships. Like if we didn't have something called a covenant, then
Mhm.
things would just fall apart all over the place.
It'd be the
And
free fall.
the system that God made that's like the foundation for every other system is the family.
That's it.
And what's so amazing about your story is it's a redemption story. It's a story of like, God found me in this position where I didn't really know who I knew him, but I didn't, or I knew of him, but I didn't really know him personally. I didn't understand who I was in light of who he is. And then, you know, he kind of just, like you said, he wooed you to himself in the process and used your marriage to do that. Where you could have questioned too, like, why did I even do this? And why do I need to stay? But God so carefully and gently, like, sent people who you didn't know to give you words that somehow you could trust.
Yeah.
Because you discerned that sounds like God, or that sense is this is God, because you needed hope. And you had hope, but you didn't, you know, to even draw on that hope, you needed a word.
That's right.
Right? You needed to know what you had inside of you.
That's right.
And that's what makes this story so like amazing, is that, you know what, something so messy that you could even have hope that life could come from something that was completely dead and gone. Like, who could tell you, who could, like, just even reading the little post about like separated 8 years, like after the first month, like some people would be like, he's not coming back. He's like, but he's living with a whole other person. Like, I'm sure that does something. It destroys like your sense of trust in like your own judgment. I'm sure you question that too. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like it's something we can't explain the process that we know we know we're being processed. At some point we figure it out, because I think there's points where you don't even realize, because you're so, feelings can wrap you up so much, like that feeling, that grief of losing what you expected to last forever and be yours, right? Like that, those feelings, sometimes people don't get over that unless they have something anchoring them, like a lot stronger than just feelings, right? Because so talk to me about like that, like what, like did you have like weeks where you just like, I mean, you're a professional person, you're in the public eye, how did you maintain your self like in those spaces? Because, and this is because I feel like this is so important for people to understand that you're not immune because you're a church leader, or because you even have, because you confess Christ. You're not immune to this pain. Like you will feel it, but it's to manage it. Like, how do you do that and not lose your mind?
In the midst of, as I said at the very beginning, in the midst of the storm of the 8 years, God developed me and told me who I was. You know, he developed the prayer warrior in me. He developed the prophet, because before I even entered into my mother's womb, I was already a prophet. I was already a prayer warrior.
Yeah.
But something that had to come along to cause the development of it to start. And for me, it was my marriage.
Right.
You know? And so for me, my marriage is what started the development of who I became. So what I did, I found solace in prayer.
Yeah.
And I did not have, like, I actually had a closet. Like, some people may sit on the side of the bed or get on their knees on the side of the bed or go to the back. I had a closet.
Yeah.
And I found safety in that closet. So some people go out, some people do this, some people do that. I found safety in prayer.
Yeah.
And so much to the point where my mentor would tell me, Ericka, you got to come out. And I would be like, I didn't want to come out.
Mm-hmm.
My children knew that if they didn't see me in the bed, the first place they would look is in the closet.
Yeah.
If I was not in that bed and my car was outside, I would.
Mm-hmm. You'd be in the closet.
And so years is where I found, that's where I found safety. Some people find it in working out, and some people find it in, like I said, going out and
Yeah.
maybe turning up, getting drunk and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I found safety in God and in my closet and in prayer. Because in prayer, I could say what I couldn't say to people.
Yeah.
I could
Right.
not tell people,
Mm-hmm.
what I was really feeling.
Right.
If you wanted to be careful about what you put out in the atmosphere as well. You want to be
Yes.
careful about who you say things to. So I couldn't say it so much there, but I could say it in prayer.
Right.
Or I could release it even in my heavenly language.
Yes.
I can pray in my heavenly language.
Yes.
Release that. So yeah, that's where I found safety. That's where I found comfort.
So
Even
can you tell us, like, when you came, like when your husband ultimately returned home,
yeah.
was that a process, or would it happen like one day? It was like he came, he agreed to come. Like, how did that happen?
So during the midst of those 8 years, there were about, I want to say maybe a year or two, we really didn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
The communication was little to none.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then we would communicate here and there, really concerning the kids and everything of that sort. And I had a group of covenant sisters, my covenant sisters.
Yes.
Every Monday, we
Mm-hmm.
would pray for my marriage. I just reached out and asked my
Wow.
covenant sisters if they could pray with me on Monday. And let me tell you something. There is something about having a group that will pray with you, rain,
Yeah.
snow, and will not judge you and will
Mm-hmm.
not judge your situation.
Right.
So every Monday, and I'm gonna call their names. I'll call their names out. Shayla, Jael, Pamela, Lornika. Every Monday,
Wow.
we would pray. And they stood in the gap for me.
Yes.
One of them said to me one Monday night, they said, I see your husband coming back home.
Wow.
And I see him coming with like just the clothes on his back.
Mm.
I see him coming. And not only did they pray with me, but they believed with me. My mentor also,
Mhm.
Elderonda,
Yeah.
also. And I held on to that word.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I always wanted to do with my husband, I always wanted to have a conversation with him and ask him, what happened?
Yes.
He would never want to have it. And I tell
Mm-hmm.
you, like for years, I wanted to have a conversation with him and ask him what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would always like,
Or that.
avoid
Mhm.
it. And so one particular day, our son was graduating from pre-K.
Mhm.
I told him about it, but I did not expect him to come. In all honesty, I didn't expect him to come, but I told him about it.
Right.
And we had been planning and planning and planning to try to meet and have a conversation. And he would always kind of like, have something else to do, something else to do.
That's it. Yeah.
And so I'm at the graduation and I literally walked by him and not even know it was him. And he called my name.
Wow.
And he said, now mind you, at this time I had lost like maybe 75 pounds,
Wow.
really taking care of myself. And he said, Ericka. And I said, and I looked back and it startled me because I just didn't expect him to be there.
Wow.
And I was happy to see him. And I said, he said, we'll talk after. And
Yeah.
so after, my son, I said, go talk to daddy. And I let him go and talk separate, away from me.
Right.
Took him back to class. And so my husband at the time came outside and he said, come to the job tomorrow so we can have the conversation. I didn't get my hopes up.
Right.
I kind of felt I was going to be let down again.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, no problem. But I did go to the job.
Right.
And at that time, the next day, is when he told me everything. See,
Wow.
I knew he lived with someone else, but he had never admitted it.
Okay.
But he finally, in that conversation, admitted it, and he admitted and told me everything.
Wow.
So, in the wisdom of God, as I said to you before, my
Mhm.
husband and I became friends. We
Wow.
became friends. The
Yes.
day we became friends.
Yes.
And when I say friends,
Mhm.
I'm talking about friends where he would call me and say, "Hey, can you help me write this email?" Or, "Hey, can you help me do this?" And I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, no problem." We were friends
Mhm.
to the point he would be, "Hey, can you do such and such?" Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but we were friends,
It's amazing.
friends. And God told me, he said he's getting his exit strategy together.
Wow.
And be moved by what you see, Ericka. So much to the point that
Mm.
we would be on the phone talking and he would be pulling up to the apartment and he would say, "I'll talk to you in the morning." Now, I'm his wife. I'm his wife.
Yeah.
But God will tell me, "Ericka, don't be moved.
Hmm.
Doing something. Trust me." And I said, "Okay."
Amazing.
Right. But I would be praying, and everything I prayed for, God did. So
Wow.
to answer your question, as God used us to become and talk and laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, laugh and talk and laugh and talk and laugh and talk.
Hmm.
God just uprooted and took him out of that.
Wow.
Now, when he came back,
Mhm.
one thing I didn't mention that in the midst of all of this, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, stage 4B. She was going through chemotherapy. I was one of her primary caregivers,
Yes.
and I bathed my mother. I took her where she needed to go. I took her to all of her treatments. I took back and forth to the doctors.
Mm.
Everything. I made the decisions. My mother went through that stage 4B for 2 complete years.
Did she know that you were going through? Well, she knew
She
because you
knew
were
that we were
living with her.
separated, but she didn't know everything. She just
Hmm.
separated.
Right.
And you have to use wisdom
Of
because
course.
your family's gonna come to your back. Your family's gonna come to your defense. And
Yes.
you would have reconciled and moved on, and they would still hold a grudge. if they
Yes.
details, you know? And so I had to be very careful with that. But my mother subsequently passed away um, during this time. And my mother and I were very close. I slept in the same bed with my mother. If she slept downstairs in the hospital bed in the house, because we ended up getting a hospital bed, I slept downstairs in a recliner right next to her. Where
Wow.
she slept is where I slept.
Yeah.
Where she was is where I was.
Mm-hmm.
So I would leave sometimes from the hospital 4 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
go home and get my kids to get to school, go to work, and then come back and do it all over again.
Wow.
One of my sisters did the doctor, like the blood work and everything, but I did the heavy things. I did the heavy appointments.
Right.
And so that was a process as well. But even in that, God was a keeper. Because I watched my mom go through chemo and
Mm-hmm.
her body be, hit with the chemo, but my mother never once complained.
Wow.
All the way to hospice at home.
Wow. What a remarkable like example even to endure.
Yeah. And my mom she was just a great, 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 great person. And so everything God promised, because God promised us a house. God promised, my children have their own rooms. God promised all that stuff. So that all came into fruition.
God.
And he came home.
Wow.
And even with that, there was still a transition that you have to go through
I'm
because,
sure.
there was a lot of moving parts with that because I had become independent.
I can imagine. You had to.
I had become independent. And so
Yeah.
he would tell me, he was like, Ericka, you don't you don't have to take out the trash.
Mm.
Um, Ericka, you don't have to lift that. Like he would have to constantly tell me, you are not by yourself anymore.
Yes. Wow.
I I didn't I did not understand that
Mm-hmm.
because I had become independent,
Yeah.
married but single.
Wow.
So I didn't understand. I didn't understand it. I
Yeah.
we had to transition back as to one, and I had to transition back to having him be the head.
Mm.
I had
Wow.
to transition to that.
Yes.
I had to transition to, my children ask me something, I immediately answer instead of, let's see what your dad says.
Right.
I
It's
just
like,
answer.
yeah,
So it's a process.
absolutely. And so now, where do you find yourself in your recovery of who you are now? Like Dr. E, the marriage coach, the wife coach.
Yes.
Like, where do you find yourself now? Do you see like you have a wealth of lived experience,
Hmm.
to give hope to people that hope just died a long time ago,
Yeah.
and so where are you going now with everything that God redeemed for you? Where's Ericka gonna be? Like, how can we get in touch with Ericka? How can people know where to go, see how this story continues and unfolds in redemption and restoration?
Yes. Well, we have been physically restored back under the same roof for 4 years now. And
God.
the way God has done this is amazing. I'll just say one thing really
Yeah.
quickly. He did not, even when he moved back.
Mm.
I don't even want to say moved back, but came back under one roof. It was still an area in him that was afraid because I did not realize how much my putting him out traumatized him.
Hmm.
It wounded his soul.
Yeah. I can
See, we look so much at, well, he did this, he did that, he did this.
right.
There was a wound in his soul when I did that. I wounded his soul. So when he moved home,
Mm.
he still had clothes in a bag. He still didn't fully hang up his clothes.
Wow.
He still did not, he was not comfortable.
Yeah.
He felt like he was still visiting.
Wow.
That's a whole nother thing to unpack, but
Yeah.
it's a lot to unpack, but he still felt that way. And the more
Mm.
I, the God gave me wisdom to build him, the more comfortable he became
Wow.
and knew that he belonged. So to answer
Yeah.
your question, where am I? I am now operating fully in the measure that God has called me to as the mouthpiece of God, as a prophet of God,
Mm.
in the mountain of family, in the mountain of education.
Mm.
Um, because my vocation is a principal. I'm a principal at a technical college for a
Mm.
career in education. So he's called me to that mountain as well to dominate the mountain of education for him and to dominate the mountain of family.
Amen.
And so how people can find me is my website, of course, is www.clinch, CLINCH, which is my last name, dash enterprises.com. www.clinch-enterprises.com is where you can find me. You can look at booking a consultation, a free consultation with me, because I am a wife coach. I
Yes.
coach individually and I do coach groups of 12. And so the individual is 6 weeks or 12 weeks. The groups is about 8 weeks as a cycle. You can also follow me on Instagram at eclinch8, eclinch8. That's the
Okay.
handle. Facebook is Caldwell-Clinch, Ericka Caldwell-Clinch on Facebook, and on TikTok.
TikTok.
Is Ericka CC, Ericka CC on TikTok. So that's how you can find me.
I
And
follow your story as it's unfolding.
as it is unfolding, yes, 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 yes. We have a great, can I tell you about Mondays?
Yes.
Okay, so Monday, July 29th. I don't know if you're going to air this before then, but hopefully Monday, July 29th is going to be Wives with the T. It's a it's
Okay.
a you can call it a podcast that God has given me, and it's myself and three other ladies, three other wives who are dominating in their field. And so we will be sharing our testimony. This particular Wives with the T is called The Real Deal, Freedom and Transparency. And so you can register for that. It's free and it's going to be on Zoom. You can register for that at my website. I also have another coaching session for groups. A group is coming up August 4th.
Okay,
And
soon.
I have the prayer journal, the 30-day Wives Prayer Journal Challenge that will begin August 1st. You have to just order your prayer journal on Amazon.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
You're like the go-to, the all-in-one. Like your story is paying back, like it's just supplying like a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
this has been such a precious time with you.
Thank
And
you.
I really appreciate you coming and sharing so candidly. And you've shared so much that it's something that I know, people would have to listen to again and share it because it's it's a redemptive story. it's just, it's hope in the face of death, and in the face of real death from your mom passing, literally death of a marriage, and it's like a resurrection of really, like, really what it's like. God knew where he was gonna, where he'd meet you and where he would transform you and then launch you out. And it's just amazing. I'm excited for what's ahead. I'm
I am.
excited for what's ahead.
I just have one last thing that I do want to say. For the wife that may be experiencing separation and everything, and maybe in a place where the husband has moved on and into another relationship. Where God has me right now, even for like the last week or two, is to really talk to that woman who is dating a married man and who loves a married man. I actually just posted something that I recorded a week ago on TikTok, and I posted it today because I wanted to post it in the timing of God.
Right.
God still loves that woman.
Mm-hmm.
Takes a level of maturity to get to this place, because as a wife, you want to be like off with her head,
Right. Right.
harlot, that's
Yes.
what I'm trying to say. And that's what our flesh does feel, because it's hurt. Most definitely it's hurt. And many times that other woman does lash out at the wife. I still have not figured that part out yet. I haven't
Yeah.
figured that part out yet, but
Yeah.
sometimes she does.
Right.
Even in that, God still wants to use her, because he
Mm-hmm.
will be in a place to be able to speak to another woman
Yes.
who's about to put her all into a married man
Wow.
that's not going to leave his wife. She's going to put her all,
Mm-hmm.
her life, her hopes, her dreams in a married man that's not going to leave his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And within the last week, maybe we can have, God has been talking to me concerning this, because I
Yeah.
struggled releasing that video.
Mm.
But someone needs to hear it.
Absolutely.
And I sent the video and I put it out, and I already have an inbox of someone that said, thank you. I needed that.
Yes.
We want
Yeah.
to always beat up the other woman. But listen, Ericka was a piece of work. I will tell you about yourself
Yeah.
in a
Right.
minute.
Right.
But the Bible says that love covers a multitude of sin. God wants to use her. And there's something going on that has caused her to be in a place where she will fall in love with somebody else's husband and think that it's going to work. That's a whole nother podcast. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, that one coming up August 20th, called The Assignment of the Strange Woman.
Good. I'm glad that you plugged that there, because that right there, you see, you got to stay tuned. You got to follow Ericka, because you were really unpacking a whole series of events. We just covered, some, just the beginning,
Yeah.
just the beginning. But I'm so grateful that you have put the framework down. And I believe the timing and the season that this is happening is crucial.
Mhm.
And again, I'm so grateful for you, for your confidence in me to have this conversation.
My very first.
Yes,
My
like,
first podcast. Thank you so very much. May God bless you for even jumping out there to just say, I'm just going to jump out there and ask. God bless you. Because out of all of those comments, and I think there may have been like over 1,000 comments on that.
and you responded to me in little old Canada, here in Florida.
Yes, 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 yes. And I just want to thank God for my husband who has
Yes,
me to share our testimony, to share what God has done for us.
yes,
Thank God for him.
yes.
I thank God for him. And I thank God for his yes, because before I do anything, I do ask him, babe, is it okay?
I'm grateful to him too. And
Thank
I'm rooting for him. I'm like, he's the other element of this. He's the hero. Like, probably wouldn't think that, but
you.
there's a hero aspect, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
This.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So God bless you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.